All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're digging into a completely fascinating and honestly largely untold psychological narrative from World War II. You know, we usually think of the war purely in terms of massive tanks, roaring aircraft, grand troop movements, the whole shebang. But what if one of the most devastating weapons was actually something much smaller, much quieter, and entirely psychological? Picture this for a second. It's December 18th, 1944. You're in a freezing Belgian forest just before dawn. A column of German panzer grenadiers has been pushing forward for 36 straight hours. Most of these guys haven't had a real meal in 4 days. Suddenly, they stumble upon an abandoned American position, and right there, practically at their boots, are these olive-drab ration boxes. Inside, real coffee, canned meat, chocolate, literally stuff these men haven't tasted in months. And yet, nobody moves. Not a single soldier takes a step forward to grab it.
So this is the exact mystery we're unraveling today. Why on earth wouldn't a starving man take a single step forward to claim food that could save his life? I mean, it completely defies every basic human survival instinct, right? Well, to understand this massive hesitation, we have to look at what those ration boxes actually represented to these incredibly desperate soldiers.
Section 1. The Math of Abundance.
To crack this case, we really need to look at the brutal logistics of late 1944. The German supply system was, well, it was completely collapsing under its own weight. Their standard combat ration was something called Ersatzbrot. It's basically this dense, gray loaf, literally made partly from sawdust and potato flour. Not great. Meanwhile, American soldiers were dealing in what looked like staggering luxury by comparison. A single abandoned American foxhole might hold processed cheese, an unopened pack of Chesterfields, fresh chocolate. The Americans literally had so much stuff, the calculation showed each soldier generated about 6 pounds of waste every single day.
Just think about the sheer scale of the American logistical dominance here. By late 1944, the U.S. Army was dropping over 40,000 tons of supplies per day onto the European continent. 40,000 tons. And the German Army on the Western Front, they were getting less than a tenth of that. The Germans didn't just want American equipment at this point, they absolutely needed it just to survive the winter.
Section 2. Weaponizing hesitation.
So the U.S. Army obviously recognized this massive gap, and they actually industrialized the process back at the engineer school at Fort Belvoir. American instructors noticed how effectively the Germans had been using booby traps during their retreats, and they decided, hey, let's flip the script. They came up with these factory-built firing devices. You've got the M1 pull device, the M1A1 pressure switch, and the truly terrifying M5 release switch, which actually detonated when weight, like say a heavy ration crate, was lifted off of it. Instead of leaving soldiers to cobble together homemade traps, the Americans just mass-produced them. A standard 19-year-old combat engineer could use this hardware to rig an entire abandoned area in the pitch dark, under fire, in under 3 minutes.
But the absolutely crucial point here is the terrifying economic efficiency of this whole tactic. For under $3 total, literally just the cost of the mechanical switch and a standard block of TNT, an American engineer could create a trap that completely immobilized an entire German platoon for half a day. Think about that return on investment. $3 to buy vital hours of time?
Now, the true genius, or I guess the true cruelty of the system, lay in the ratio. The Americans were abandoning absolute mountains of supplies, but they didn't rig everything, not even close. Only about 5 out of 100 items were actually rigged. This meant a German soldier could go in, pick up 95 perfectly safe ration boxes, smoke the cigarettes, eat the canned meat, and be completely lulled into this false sense of security. The danger felt way exaggerated. And then, the 96th box would kill him. It was basically a deadly lottery.
Moving into Section 3. Hitler's fuel gamble.
This entire Delhi dynamic reached its absolute peak in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. Adolf Hitler actually built his entire final offensive, Operation Watch on the Rhine, on a catastrophic logistical assumption. See, his plan required 5 million gallons of fuel for 29 divisions to smash through the Ardennes forest all the way to Antwerp. But Germany just didn't have it. The whole operation relied completely on this desperate gamble that German armored columns, like the Spearhead led by Joachim Peiper, could literally drink American gasoline from captured fuel depots as they advanced.
It's almost like watching a ticking clock on Peiper's fuel gauge. And at first, crazy enough, the plan actually seemed to be working. On December 17th, Piper captures 50,000 gallons of fueling in. He even forces captured American prisoners to refuel his tanks for him. He's closing in fast on a massive depot at Stavelot that held 3 million gallons of American fuel. That's the prize that could literally win the offensive. But then, these tiny, improvised groups of American engineers step in. On December 18th, they blow the bridges over the Ambleve River right in front of Piper's panzers.
And then they do something even more desperate. To stop the German advance dead in its tracks, Major Paul Solis ordered 124,000 gallons of precious U.S. fuel to be poured straight onto a narrow dirt road near Stavelot and set entirely ablaze. It created a literal wall of fire that blocked the panzers and denied them the millions of gallons sitting just beyond it. Because of delays like this, Piper's tanks eventually ran completely dry, and his men literally had to abandon their vehicles and walk back to Germany on foot.
Which brings us to Section 4, Environmental Paranoia. If we zoom back in from the macro strategy for a second, psychologists actually later coined a specific term for the toll this took on the soldiers: environmental paranoia. It's this fascinating, terrifying state where the threat isn't just a mine or a tripwire anymore. It's the entire physical environment. The ground, a door handle, a blanket, a discarded tin of coffee, every single surface becomes highly suspect. These constant, unpredictable traps caused a clinical breakdown where soldiers just completely stopped trusting the physical world around them.
And this created an impossible dilemma for German squad leaders as they retreated through this landscape of abandoned American abundance. On one hand, if you strictly forbid scavenging, well, your men starve, they freeze, and they physically lose the ability to fight. But on the other hand, if you allow them to scavenge, men get blown up unexpectedly. And this incredibly paralyzing paranoia spreads through the whole unit, grinding the entire advance to an absolute halt.
Faced with that, the German High Command essentially chose the first option. They issued these really desperate new standing orders. Things like, do not touch enemy equipment. Engineers must manually sweep all buildings. NCOs must personally open the first ration box. But think about what this actually meant on the battlefield. It caused absolutely devastating delays. Freezing soldiers who just found a warehouse packed with thick American winter coats had to sit there and wait hours for a busy sapper team to arrive and clear the room. Extremely valuable, life-saving time was just bleeding away. And that leads us to our final section, Section 5, the fear of the gap.
Ultimately, the physical traps birth a psychological terror that cost the Germans the one thing they couldn't replace: time. Returning to our opening story, that starving squad frozen in the Belgian forest near Stavelot. Well, here's the punchline. They waited. They waited 2 full hours for engineers to arrive and meticulously check those abandoned ration boxes. And guess what? The engineers found absolutely nothing. The boxes were perfectly safe. The squad eventually ate. But those 2 hours were gone forever. In the brutal arithmetic of the Battle of the Bulge, a 2-hour delay meant the difference between crossing a bridge and finding it blown to pieces. The trap didn't even need to exist to work perfectly.
An intelligence officer actually captured the core of this terror. In this amazing quote from a captured German NCO back in January 1945, he said, "We stopped because we could no longer stand the feeling of wanting something that might kill us." That is just a chilling admission. It reveals that the worst part of this warfare wasn't the shrapnel at all. It was the psychological torture of standing in a room full of everything you desperately needed to survive and being absolutely terrified to reach out and touch it. Which brings us to our final thought for today. Was the most devastating weapon of World War II not a massive bomb, but an untouched ration box? Think about what this all really means. The ultimate weapon wasn't the $3 explosive device itself. It was the vast, unclosable gap in industrial abundance. The Americans had so much stuff that leaving it behind cost them absolutely nothing, while the Germans had so little that walking past it cost them everything. It's a pretty dark reminder of exactly how scarcity and abundance can manipulate the human mind. This explainer really shows how that simple logistical gap turned a basic human need into paralyzing terror. I'm going to leave you with that to think about. Until next time, keep analyzing the structures behind the stories.